So, firstly, welcome, Ketki. Thanks for accepting this invite to be a speaker in this podcast. This really helps us in understanding the industry perspectives. And you, being an expert and working in the industry closely for 10 to 12 years, you have a lot of experience that goes behind it. So, that experience with adding with your perspectives going forward will give a lot of insights going like insights if there's a change that we want to see growing change. I think people like you, your perspectives matter a lot. So again,
Sure.
thanks again for accepting our email.
No, thanks for having me. I think it's a brilliant platform for us to get together and talk about things that are usually not talked about. Because it's very normal for us to look at some success story, to look at a career trajectory that someone has taken, but nobody really digs deep to understand how that journey was. And I think that is very interesting because that journey, following that journey, is what's going to inspire a lot of people. There are bumps along the way, so it's very important for people to know that as well. So all in all, I'm really excited about this concept, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much. So I'll just introduce myself
Sure.
first, and I'll introduce the idea about behind this podcast, and you can give your introduction and tell us what exactly do you do, and from there we can proceed more subjective. So I am Kushal. Right now, I'm working as a community pharmacist. I have a background in formulation science. I have worked in the industry for 2 years, developing oral formulations and nano formulations. So that's my basic expertise. And now, right now, I am me myself with Jitin. We both are very passionate about bringing life sciences stories to the outside world. We want to democratize this knowledge.
Right.
So that's where this idea behind the podcast has come from. So as the name suggests, beyond the lab coat, and you've rightly mentioned the untold stories which are often missed, and especially in the healthcare industry where many people are, for some reason we don't know, people are not very vocal about the journeys or the actual industry perspectives. So that's what we want to bring, and that's the idea behind the podcast.
Right.
So I hope with this session, with your expertise and your vision, people might have somewhere in the industry, they might take up your perspective and contribute towards the growth in the industry.
Absolutely, I'd be more than happy to give some knowledge and information to that effect. So I'll just start by introducing myself. I will dial back about 2 decades um, to the time when I was doing my bachelor's. So I was one of those unfortunate stories of, very passionate children who want to get into a medical school, and then they don't get into a medical school, and then they're trying to figure out what to do next. So I think about 90% of my batch was sailing in the same boat. That's how I landed up in a microbiology course for my bachelor's at Garware College in Pune. And it was a heartbreak that I had to get over, right? So I think the first year was just heartbreak. But by the time I went into the second year, I actually started enjoying what I was studying. And that was the breaking point for me because that was my first experience on, the saying that whatever happens, happens for a reason. Because I found my reason there with fundamental science. Um, so I continued through that, and at the end of my bachelor's, I decided to then go to the University of Bremen in Germany for my master's. So I was very young back then. It was very exciting, and it was a bunch of friends who were all going from India to Germany. And I'm very fortunate about the fact that I could leave the country so young because you're still impressionable, you're very moldable, and you're still absorbing everything that's happening around you. And of course, I had some understanding of German as a language, so it wasn't a scary situation for me language wise. And our course was entirely in English. When I went to Germany, I started in the lab. So we used to have coursework that was very intense on lab work, which was very different from what we have in India, at least the format we had back then, because it was more theoretical and less of lab work. And that's when I realized that I need to pick up these lab skills because I'm massively lacking in them. My theory is good, but my practical, not so much. And that's where I decided to do a part-time student internship at Max Planck Institute of Marine Microbiology, which was just across the road from University of Bremen. And I was there for 2 years, so all through my masters. And that was such an enriching experience because that built a lot of confidence in me in being able to design experiments, to conduct experiments, and to successfully run them, right? So that was those 2 years, I think, were formative years for my time in the lab. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And towards the end of that, the lab where I was doing my master thesis offered to accept me as a PhD student. And I had quite enjoyed working there. I'd published a paper, so I had a kick out of it. And I decided that I want to stay back and do my PhD in the same lab. Uh, Another wonderful stint, and I had a lot of publications coming out from my PhD, so that was great. And we have a grading system in Germany, right? So I was awarded summa cum laude, which is with highest honors. So that was, really the cherry on top for that entire experience. But after that, I decided to come back to India.
Wow. Okay.
At the peak of it all, I decided I wanted to come back to India because I had this hunch that if I stay here for too long, I'm never going to go back.
Yeah, similar journey.
And I wanted to try it out. I thought it's an experiment. You're always doing experiments in the lab. So why not do an experiment with
In
your
life.
career, in your own life, right? Why not? So that's when I came back and I joined ISER Pune for a postdoc in the field of neurobiology. So for my PhD, I'd worked in the field of neurochemistry. And so, that kind of journey of still following the same track, you have that comfort of still working on a topic that you're familiar with. Um, and I joined there, started working. I saw that there are a lot of differences in how a lab operates in India versus in Germany. Some things were good, some things were not that great. But anyway, I after 2 years of my postdoc, one thing was very clear for me that I'm not cut out for academics anymore, and that I want to move to industry. Now, while that decision was easy, the transition was not because there's no one who helps you, who guides you in that transition from academics to industry. There's not many people you can go to. There are not many mentors out there that you can find. Um, and so that was a fair bit of trial and error to get your foot in the door in the industry, at least back then, was not an easy feat. Um, and I guess it's the same even today. It's not as easy. Um, so I was very fortunate to get a postdoctoral position to start off at JVK Bio in the informatics unit. So JVK Bio is now called Aragen. The informatics unit that I worked for was spun out into a completely new company called Accelera. But that was a very interesting time because I started off by working in the domain of drug repurposing, which is essentially finding new uses for
Yes.
old drugs um, through complete in silico analysis. And I thought this is great, because there are so many drugs out there that are either off patent, which have been discontinued for several reasons, and so much of investment has gone into R&D of those drugs, right? So we are talking about a span of say 10 years and an investment of billions of dollars, and now you're trying to repurpose them to leverage all the effort that has gone into it. And that was a very interesting time because that was also the beginning of our journey in the avenue of AI based drug discovery and development. And we had a blast. So it was a team of people who had their PhDs from abroad, a lot of them like minded, who had come back to India, who wanted to, kind of test out the waters. And that was quite nice because most of us were of the same age group as well. Uh, and I learned a lot in that because in silico work was not something that I was familiar with. Of course, we used to work very closely with teams of bioinformaticians and computational biologists. But fun time, and I delivered a couple of projects there, and then I realized that this is nice, but I actually want to be on the business side of things. So I went to the department head and I said, "Look, I've had a good time here, but I want to try out the business side. I want to explore the commercial side of things." Um, and he was very generous and he said, "Okay, give it a shot." Um, and his name is Dr. Nandu Gattu, by the way, and I am forever grateful for him because that was a tipping point for me within the industry to make that transition from operations into business development. So, in the course of my role in business development, I started interacting with a lot of scientists internationally. So, I was focused mostly on Japan for a brief time. I was also focusing on Europe. And that helped me learn a lot because that helps you understand the process of deal making, that helps you understand negotiations, that helps you understand the business of doing science. So I had a great time interacting with scientists and understanding their pain points and seeing how we could serve them with our data analytics solutions. And I also learned the art of deal making, the business behind science, all of which is very important. Uh, so I spent about a little over 5 years there at Accelera, and that really shaped me as a scientist who was in the know of business development as well. And then I thought, okay, now I'm ready for a new adventure. What's next? And I happened to meet, you know, an individual, Vishal Goel. He was at that point, he is a serial entrepreneur and he's a rock star in the business of life sciences real estate. So we spoke, and the opportunity on the table was to work in another contract research organization. I thought about it, we did a lot of back and forth. And then one fine day, I was like, no, I want to try life sciences real estate because, you're a pro in it and I want to learn what it's all about. And he was again very generous to say, okay, come. I didn't know anything about real estate. I'm a scientist who's worked in a lab. I have no understanding of what it takes to build these labs. So that was another pivot that I did, another adventure that I went after, not knowing exactly how I could add value. But I knew I wanted to try something different. Um, and yeah, I went there. I understood how nuanced the entire area is because usually, as a scientist, we don't appreciate the efforts that go into setting up labs. We assume that the labs are always ready. But if you look at a timeline of maybe 1.5 to 2 years before a lab is fully functional, setting up a lab ground up, it's an art. And there's a lot of science behind it as well because you need to understand the kind of operations that happen in a lab for you to build it out. And it was great because I was working with a team that was not of scientists, but they knew the ins and outs of a lab and what it takes to build a lab like a scientist would. And I used to sit through those conversations with prospects, prospective tenants talking about what they want to set up in their labs and our teams. And I used to be amazed at the knowledge that they had about science, about different kinds of operations, chemistry, biology, while being real estate focused company. And that was really nice because it opens up your mind as well. It opens up your mind to new possibilities. It opens up your mind to trying out something. Maybe you'll fail at it. It's okay to fail at it, but you at least try. And there I kind of found my niche. So the organization I'm talking about is Rx Propellant. I found my niche there because I knew the scientist's mindset and I knew what they wanted to hear about a life science park or a cluster or a project, because otherwise they are talking two different languages, right? An architect would talk about it in a very different way than a scientist. So um, I came in to bridge that gap of communication. So we built out a nice narrative around Rx Propellant and what we do and the value we add to these companies, pharma biotech companies. And it's been a very, very interesting journey. But what really drove me in this organization is also that it was never about buildings. It was about how do we leverage this building, how do we build a cluster, and how do we have an impact. Impact meaning how do we put India on the global map of life sciences, where infrastructure is a part of it. Of course, the R&D that happens, or manufacturing that happens, are the other moving parts. But at least we are setting this foundation to put India on a global scale. And that was really fun, and that still is a lot of fun. So we started initiatives within the cluster to engage with the scientific community. So just recently we rolled out a newspaper that's called the Cluster Chronicle to educate everyone on what's happening within Genome Valley, which is Hyderabad's biggest life sciences cluster and India's first systematically developed life sciences cluster. So the task at hand is always to think out of the box and to see how we can build a scientific community. So we have an initiative called GV Connect. It's a networking platform where we get all the scientists together and they can talk to each other. They know who they can partner with if they need to. The next pain point that we saw is skilling, because clearly postgraduates have the degrees but do not have all the tools that are required to be employable in the industry, where the industry spends a lot of resources and time and energy in getting them familiarized in the lab. So we thought, why not address it by starting a skilling academy of our own? So we are working on that right now, where we are curating coursework and we want to train postgrads with hands-on laboratory experience so that they can be placed in good places, good organizations, and they can hit the ground running. And currently we're working on it. We are really excited about it. We should be in a position to roll out our first batch very soon. So that's one aspect that we are dealing with. Then the next aspect that we are dealing with is startups. Obviously, India is buzzing with startups. And of course, the wave of startups with IT companies or IT focused ideas was um, much before the wave for biotechs. But we do see a lot of great ideas that are bubbling under. A lot of times, these startups have two unique problems. One is labs where they can conduct their R&D, and the second one is funding, where they don't know where the next funding is going to come from for them to continue down this path. And we are trying to address it by building an accelerator, which is for startups that have gone beyond the proof of concept to help them scale sustainably. Uh, so that includes not just the space, but common analytical facilities. It includes mentorship and also access to funds. So that's another piece that we are working on. And it's quite unique because for a company that's focused on life sciences infra to get into these associated areas, which are critical and which have to be addressed, makes it very exciting. And yeah, so that's where we are at right now. And I am really excited about where we head with this. And I'm really excited about the Indian life sciences landscape. Because just talking to scientists day in and day out, you know that there's so much energy and you know this is our decade. We have to seize it. And I think a decade from now, it's going to be a completely different story for us. And I can't wait to see how that pans out.
Thanks for actually making my part easy. You have actually talked every part of your journey, and you have already spoke every nook and corner of what is you about. So to actually put it in a speech, I think it is a very big skill for you. You actually spoke like you have already done a lot of podcasts already, and you are very
No, no, I
expert about
haven't.
it. But yeah, thank you for this whole journey. Actually, if you don't mind, we'll actually go back to your whole journey. We'll actually pick some parts where I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
While you're actually talking about specific things, I wondering what exactly happened through this phase and what were you thinking? Because that mindset helps people
Yeah.
to choose how to shape their careers, and coming to your perspectives in the industry, those things matter,
Yeah.
right? So let's go back to your initial days where you have chosen to go to Germany.
Yeah.
So could you just elaborate in a few words, why did you actually choose Germany?
Right. So at that point, I think, if I remember correctly, there were a few batches of seniors who had already gone to University of Bremen. So that brings in a level of comfort, saying, okay, they are there, and they are doing well. So
Of
you're
course.
going to do well as well. So that was one, and the other one was because of my familiarity with German as a language.
Wow,
You
okay.
know, when you're studying, I studied German for 2 years, and you automatically, when you're learning a new language, and so when I studied German, that was in my 11th and 12th. When you're studying a new language, you automatically get curious about the
Yes,
place
yes.
through the instances that are portrayed, through the stories that are told, and you want to know more about
And
that
there's a
place.
new culture that you
Exactly.
getting to know about. There are a lot
Right.
of new things
Yeah.
which will be a lot of curious things to, yeah.
Absolutely. So I was very curious about the place, and it just so happened that there was an opportunity to go there. So I said, we have to seize this.
Okay.
And of course, there was there's an interesting story there as well. There was an entrance test. So you could only get admitted into the university if you passed the entrance exam. And I took the test, and I thought I did fairly well.
What's the test?
But
If you can mention it,
it's a
you
very,
can
it's a
mention.
special test for so it was a special question sort of Q&A that was conducted by the university itself.
So
It
you
was not a
applied to the
general, yeah,
university
you
and they
apply to
gave
the
you a test.
university, and
Okay.
then after them screening your application, you have to go through that test. And I thought I did a good job.
Okay.
When the results were out, all my batchmates who had been admitted got their letters, and I did not.
Wow.
So I assumed I didn't get through. But I was wondering why, because I actually had a good feeling about it. And so I obviously was upset. And then about 2 weeks later, I get an email from University of Bremen saying I've still not confirmed my admission. So I wrote back to them saying I didn't get a letter, and it was a physical letter. It wasn't an email, it was a physical letter that was sent out. And they said, oh, we sent you the letter, did you not get it? So then they resend the letter to me,
Okay.
and that's when I realized that I was actually selected, but just because I had not received the letter, I assumed that I had not. The first
Wow.
letter was lost somewhere.
I think here we can learn one beautiful thing. When you were sure that you did good,
Yeah.
but sometimes things not fall in your way, but you still wanted to just stick to it, and you actually put that initiative of following up. That's where you grab that opportunity.
Yeah.
So sometimes we might have the opportunity, maybe that has missed in the process,
Yeah.
but only when you follow up,
Yeah.
that opportunity will come through us. So
Yeah.
that's one good lesson that we can learn from this experience.
Yeah.
Could you just elaborate on what was the differences that you have saw? Like you said there is a lot of difference that initially it was the first 1 year was actually getting adapted to all those changes compared to what you saw here.
Yeah.
So if you can just elaborate those difference between here and there,
Right.
and just generalize on what exactly would be to look forward.
Yeah. So I think the differences, if I have to split them into two, one is the general change in your way of being, because suddenly you're living by yourself, you're cooking for yourself, you're taking your adulting, right? That's the
Yeah.
term you guys use. So you're
Yes.
adulting. We didn't have that term back then.
Of course.
So that's of course the one big change. The second change is when it comes to the academic piece, right? We are very good with theory. We know the ins and outs of it. And we can write long essays on any topic, but when it comes to hands-on experience in the lab, there's still a lot of catching up to do. There the focus is more on lab work and learning through practical.
Yeah.
Theory comes next. It's okay to miss bits and pieces of the theory, but as long as you understand the logic behind what you're doing, uh, you're fine.
Yeah.
And that is a great way of learning. So I had to do a lot of unlearning and learning, because the bookish way I had mastered. But here we were, where we had to apply more logic, we had to be more hands on, we had to think and design experiments and execute them. So that was a bit of a challenge initially, at least from where I came from. But yeah, if you have the grit and if you have the determination, then you can do it. So like we all, I think the entire batch of students that went from India, we had our own, catching up to do, but eventually we all did good.
Exactly. I mean, I can relate to my own journey as well.
Yeah.
When I was here, as you said, I was very good at theory, but even specific thing with even small things like handling a pipette.
Yeah.
During my B Farm days, having a electronic pipette was something we used to maintain a logbook to actually use it.
Yeah.
It was like something very precious. So from there to when I went abroad, and it was more driven by your own passion.
Yeah.
So if you are passionate or if you are curious about learning, it's like you can directly go there and just start working. I've even seen school students who come in the summer and to work in labs.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I thought could be initiated here. I'm hopeful, and
Yeah.
I just want your perspective as well on how exactly would you see here in India, especially what changes that you might get from your experience in the academia there.
Right. So one is, of course, and I don't know if the situation has changed, and I would imagine it's changed a bit also in academics, where the emphasis is more on practical coursework. Um, the other thing is, I believe students should also proactively go out and seek internships in their breaks, which is a common practice there. It's not so common here. Sometimes your coursework requires you to do internship for maybe a month or two. So when I was in the last year of my bachelor's in India, we had to do a one long internship. So I remember I went to Pyramid in Mumbai for my internship, and that was nice because you're in the lab all the time. And you learn. You may not be actively involved in everything because maybe you're a little naive to be working in a lab and doing something more meaningful, but just being around there and seeing how the scientists operate, that itself is an eye opener and gets
Yeah.
you excited about being in a lab. So I think students should go out of their way and in their break times try to get these internships. You shouldn't worry about whether it's paid or not, quite honestly,
Yes.
because at the end of the day, you can't put a price tag on the experience that you get
Exactly.
at that point of time. So you should do that, and not just lab. If you are interested in the business of science, then get an internship somewhere at a company.
Yeah.
Get an internship at a completely different place, because it opens up your mind to new ideas that you may not have explored so far.
Yes.
So I
Absolutely.
actively encourage students.
Go a little forward. Now you have done your PhD, and that is, as you said, it was one of the biggest decisions that you have to choose to come back to India. That moment where I've seen personally, and you might have also seen who went abroad. We talk about brain drain here,
Yeah.
especially in healthcare.
Yeah.
uh, in our industry, although we might be hopeful that India is growing more faster, but there's still a lot of pace to catch up,
Yeah.
right? So in that process, most people would prefer being there.
Yeah.
Even after doing PhD, it's more difficult in India. Back then, when you were back then it was different.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it was more difficult to actually build up a career. But you taking a decision and coming back is a big thing. So what exactly was going through your mind, and if you can just open up on your thoughts, and was it relevant even now?
Yeah. So for me, it was, like I said, it's an experiment that I had to do in my life. You try, you either, you know, crack it or you fail at it. And I have to be honest. So when I came back to India and when I decided after my postdoc that I wanted to go to industry and I didn't want to continue in academics, I was actively pursuing opportunities in outside India as well. And so, what really reaffirmed my resolve to stay back in India was this very peculiar thing that had happened. I can't forget it, I think, for the rest of my life. So, I'd applied to, I mean, I'd obviously applied to a lot of places. I got an invitation to visit one of these European large pharma companies for the position that I had applied to. So I went there and I was thrilled to be there. And it was a 3 day intense interview with different team leaders, with different stakeholders. You had to give a presentation. And I thought I did really well. Um, and then on the last day, when I was about to leave, the person who, if I were hired, the person I would report to, said to me, "Hey, thank you for coming, but we've already chosen an internal candidate."
Okay.
And then I was thinking, then what's the point of flying in a candidate from a different country? Is that a point that you're trying to make there? Saying, oh, we've scanned for candidates from across the globe, but then finally we didn't find any good fitment, so we are going ahead with this candidate. And that made me a little sad because you don't do that, right? You don't play with people's emotions by asking them to come, and then on the last day, you say that we had already selected a candidate. Why put up this show?
Yeah.
So after that happened, I said, okay, I am not going to bite this bait. I am happy in India. I'll find something here and I'll see how it goes. And fortunately for me, despite continuing in the industry in India, I got to travel a lot outside the country for a lot of conferences, business meetings. So I still had that global perspective while keeping my roots in India, and that was fantastic, I'd say.
Wow. And so, is it relevant even now? So, would you have chosen the same decision, to take the same decision even
Yeah.
now?
I would, I would. And
Okay.
I would tell you there are a lot of people who are sailing in the same boat who want to come back, not just after their PhDs and postdocs, but even after being, at senior scientist levels in pharma companies. Um, I speak to a lot of my friends who want to come back. A lot of them want to embark on their entrepreneurial journeys in India,
Yes,
saying,
exactly.
I'll come back and start something of my own. So that thought still resonates with people. And now, of course, it's more attractive than it was a decade ago. That I can vouch for sure. Because the opportunities that exist today are much more.
Absolutely. I think, as you said, I think these things, the opportunity here and the amount of growth scope
Yeah.
and the entrepreneurial mindset, which is the paradigm shift that is happening.
Yeah.
I think that gives a motivation, and from your journey itself, people can understand that if you chose it, anyone who is there can also come here and still be a successful people in their own careers,
Yeah.
be it in their jobs or if they wanted to do startups. I think there's a lot of future ahead now in India.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I only encourage people when they are thinking about this. I say, come test out the waters and then decide for yourself. You know, you can always go back if it doesn't work for you. And it may not work for everyone,
Yes.
but try it out. You know, at least give it a shot and then you'll figure out what
Yes, right.
happens.
Eh, Only if we have that bandwidth of, if we need to give that bandwidth. Most people, what we think is like the Indian mindset. After you graduate, you have to go to a job, get settled, get married, being financially independent. So all that thought process somewhere hinders our scope of experimentation,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So as you rightly mentioned, if when you have the bandwidth, like actually when you rightly said, you chose at an early stage. Maybe if you have chosen at a later stage, there might be a lot of
Yeah.
other factors might come into picture while choosing. But I think because I am related to myself, I have also chosen to come back, and I chosen at an early stage because I have the bandwidth of experimenting.
Yeah.
So for people who wanted to come back, this will be one great motivation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do understand that, you know, there are other nuances, like you rightly said. Um, you you're settled in a country, you're getting very comfortable. You've gotten comfortable, you call it your home.
Yeah.
A lot of times, then you get married, you have kids, and then you worry about your kids' future, and then that decision to come back just becomes more and more difficult.
Yes.
So yeah, if you have to take the plunge, take it early. If you succeed, well and good. If you fail, you can always go back using the credentials that you built for yourself, and see where your journey goes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Have a little deviation from the very serious conversation that we had. Which was really nice. Let's have some ice breaking now.
Okay.
Let's talk about what Ketki is apart from her professional life. So everyone has this perspective. A scientific career person would not have a lot of personal life because people will be much dedicated towards their lab work, and they have the perception that we work in and out. The day in day out we'll just be there, and that's the common perception that the people have. So let's just break that, and let's explore the personal aspect.
All right. So I love traveling. So me and my husband, we don't leave any opportunity unturned when it comes to traveling, both in India and outside as well. In fact, I just came back from a wonderful
Wow.
holiday. Um, love going out. Hyderabad is a great place where there are new places cropping up, you know, every few months. So we
Exactly
love to
now.
go out and try out the food and drinks at all sorts of new places. I love dancing, although I'm not trained in
Wow.
dancing, but I love dancing.
Wow.
So it's nice once in a while to go and let your hair down, so to say, and have a
Yes.
good time. Um, yeah, other than that, I love doing a lot of DIY projects at home for the house. So I love doing up my house.
Nice.
Uh, and I love cooking, although I've not done a whole lot of cooking of late, but I love trying out new dishes, especially Asian cuisine, Italian cuisine.
Wow.
So I do that. I attempted gardening, but turns out I have a black thumb, so I have given it up entirely. And yeah, so I generally love hanging out with our friends whenever we can. So that's what we do. Free time.
Actually, one great advantage while living abroad is that we learn everything to do by ourselves. That
Yeah,
we develop interest, right? In
yeah.
even small things. As you said, you do DIY for decorating your own house. That's really interesting. So, how do you manage all this? How do you manage your professional life with personal life? How's the work-life balance?
I think I am very blessed to have a work life balance in general, and I'm a strong proponent of that. And my organization, Rx Propellant, is a strong proponent of that. So I make sure that after I mean, of course, there are exceptions when we have events coming up, but I make sure that me and my team, more importantly, so there are days when I have to stretch, but I make sure that my team doesn't have to stretch beyond their working hours. because that's the only way in which you're going to come back refreshed and re-energized,
Yeah.
right? So it's, of course, the time that you're at work is action packed and power packed, and I can be a tough taskmaster, is what I've heard from people. But that's the way to be. That's the only way in which you're going to maximize your work time and maximize your free time. So
Yeah.
it happens. It happens.
So, as I said, it's a common perception that is there out there that people in science careers would not have a lot of life because there will be a lot of working hours.
Yeah.
So, what's your opinion on this, and how have you seen around you, like people in the science careers, and what would you give a message for people who want to have a work-life balance in a science career?
Right. I don't think it's not that it's impossible to have a work-life balance in science. It's about planning it right. You know, you're always going to have experiments that have a 12-hour timeline, that have a 24-hour timeline, that requires you to go to the office or to the lab on weekends. I've also been a part of that journey. But it's about how do you plan your time so that your free time, even if it's a little skewed, you still have it. Especially what I see is a lot of budding scientists who are doing their PhD work. They start late, then they end the day late, and then what that does is you have just gobbled up a big piece of the day into something very unproductive. I myself would always recommend to start early, because there's something very magical to still have a few hours left for yourself after a hard day's work. May not be possible all the time, of course, depends on the experiments that you're running, but it's very important to have that structure.
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens, and especially during PhD, this is very different from Germany. So in the lab that we were working in, we had to be in the lab by 8 o'clock in the morning. And so there is this structure that you have to be in there at 8 o'clock, so you plan your day accordingly. In India, as against that, if you're a PhD student, it can stretch from 5 to 7 years sometimes that you're
Yes.
doing your PhD for. And then when I looked at some of these guys, they're walking in at any hour, at 11, 12 in the afternoon, and then they're staying back till late. When are you getting that time for yourself then, right? So you're going to
Yeah.
hit the bed after you go back, and then you're going to sleep through because you slept late, and then you're ready for work again. But I feel having that sort of structure, of course, some people are morning people, some people like to get out of the bed a little later, but having a structure, having a format is very important.
Yes,
It is
absolutely.
possible.
Yeah, there's no one thing, one size fits all.
Yeah.
But everyone has to find their own routine,
Rhythm.
rhythm. Yeah, that's
Yes.
rhythm. That's the right word.
Yeah. Yeah.
And specifically in science careers, it's very much important because, as you said, more often than not, it'll be a little difficult when we stretch hours, because we might need to, because sometimes in the lab we might put some experiment which is 12 hours or
Yeah.
18 hours long because of the instrument or because of the method that we apply.
Yeah.
Right. So what one hack that I used to do during my lab days was, if I plan a longer experiment, I just put that, and I'll just be around. I talk to my friends. I take that opportunity to spend time with my close people,
Yeah.
because I don't have to do anything just by unless observe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's one hack that I found.
Yeah.
If you can give some hacks for people who wanted to maintain better work-life balance in science career.
I think one of the, I wouldn't call it a hack, but I would say if you need some time out from a lab, step out of the lab.
Yeah.
A lot of people just linger around
Yeah.
there for no joy. If you need to be out, go out, grab a coffee, go for a stroll. We are blessed with having these academic institutes which are sprawling,
Yeah.
lush campuses. So go out for a walk, kind of refresh yourself and clear your thoughts and do whatever it takes. But just lingering around there doesn't help anyone, because you're going to
Exactly.
feel that fatigue of being
Exactly.
in the lab for so long.
Yeah, as you
that
said,
just
because in Germany or mostly in the West, because there is a definite timeline that we give or the curriculum gives us. We plan accordingly. But as
Yeah.
you said, in India, because of flexible timeline, people might spend more time.
Exactly.
They feel we have time.
Yeah.
So
So
they,
time and what, at least I believe that time is not directly proportional to productivity.
yeah,
You have to
absolutely.
focus more on the productive hours that you spend rather than the number of hours that you spend. And that's a common misconception among scientists in India, saying if I am just hanging out in the lab for 12 hours, that means I'm working hard. That doesn't mean you're working hard.
Of course, yes.
You could be productive only for a couple of hours from that. But
We can see
you
from
are-
the results, right? Majority people, even if they're spending their 5 years or 6 years of time in their PhD,
Yeah.
hardly with when you compare with the PhD from outside,
Yeah.
the number of publications or the quality of publications
Yeah.
is comparatively less,
Yeah.
which portrays that the quality of the work matters the most than the number of time you have spent in it.
Absolutely. So just from my PhD, right? My PhD was 3.5 years. In
Wow.
3.5 years, I published 7 papers and 1 book article.
Wow.
I think that is great.
Yes.
That's a good churn rate to have as well. But there was this general motivation and push to not linger around beyond those, 3 years you have funding. Beyond that, you can get funding for another half a year. And you can continue that cycle, but that stops at some point of time.
Yes.
Otherwise, you have to apply for unemployment money,
Yes, yes.
and live off that. And I think that is a great motivation for students to also wrap up in time.
Yeah.
Uh, because just because the funds are available does not mean that you should continue for years and years together.
Also, one other thing is as they drag it, right? The motivation for being hopeful or planning ahead
Yeah.
decreases because once you are settled and comfortable in one thing,
Yeah.
to actually think about going forward and doing something different,
Yeah.
the resistance increases.
Of course, the resistance increases, your motivation decreases,
Yeah.
and you just get comfortable being where you are.
Yes.
So you're not going to think out of the box. Um, on the flip side, if you just continue, at a slow pace, someone else is going to catch up with your research,
Exactly.
which happens a lot of
Yeah.
times because everything is so fast moving and you're
Nowadays,
tuned to
it's
one
more
train of
competitive,
thought.
yeah.
And someone else is going to come in with a brand new idea and they're going to publish, and then you are thinking, what did I work on for all these years? And that
Yes.
creeps in a lot of
Yes,
times.
yes.
A lot of
Absolutely.
times I've seen PhD students go on and on for 5, 6, 7 years, and they are so done towards the end that even writing their theses becomes a task.
Yes.
And writing a thesis can become a 1 year long journey.
Yes.
For us, writing, for me especially, writing my thesis and wrapping up my experiments all happened in parallel. It was a difficult time, but I had, I think, just 1 month to wrap up my thesis, to finish off writing manuscripts for my publications, and to kind of close everything in a meaningful way.
Yes.
And that is required. Those very crisp timelines, I think, should also come from the PIs.
Yes.
Maybe a student is not equipped to have those timelines, but to have those sort of milestones in mind is very important.
Exactly. That's right. So, going forward, what is Ketki as a leader? Because now you are a senior vice president of Rx Propellant. What is Ketki as a leader? You have I'm sure you manage teams. How do you manage teams? How do you keep the team's motivations or productivity high?
Right. So for me, I think the term leader is very rich. It's used in many different ways, but I want to be more of a mentor.
Wow.
So whenever I have, and of course, because we are in a niche field of life sciences, real estate, I routinely work with a lot of, freshers who have no understanding of life sciences. And one thing I tell them is that it's okay if you don't see yourselves, super connected with the field of life sciences. That's completely okay. Um, but as long as you're learning something, that's very important. So your journey with me can be as long as you want, as short as you want, but at the end of the day, there has to be a learning that you take with you, which may not be on the subject matter. It may be something as general as, you know, the way of operating in an office, or how to get your work done, how to be more disciplined, how to be more structured, how to articulate your thoughts in a presentation. These are the skills you'll carry with you. So I just want my team members to take some learning with them, and that is always my key.
Wow. I think that also comes from your personal experience, right? You've also mentioned when you were actually looking for jobs, or your transition from the academia to the industry, it was not easy because it was hard to find mentors. You learned from your own journey, is what I feel, right?
Yeah. So
You
for me, while I know that there were some situations where I did not have any mentors, there were some situations when I had brilliant mentors, and I have to only do justice by paying it forward. I that's the only way to go about it. Now, whether I have mastered the artistry of mentoring or not is another story, because there are also things that you learn on
Yeah,
the go, right?
yeah,
But at least the attempt is to pay it forward. Where, see, every time in your journey, and irrespective of whether you're in science or in any other sector, you will have some stints that are long, some stints that are short, some stints that are memorable, some that are not. As long as you're learning from every single stint, as long as you're learning from every single person, it's worth it.
yes.
It's worth it, because that's the only way in which you're going to grow.
It's really
That's very
important.
important.
Actually, you have actually rightly mentioned, only if there is an environment where you can, like, because you said you want to be a mentor, that actually builds a collaborative environment, rather than, if let's say, if you might just assign jobs and micromanage,
Yeah.
that doesn't help in rapid growth,
Yeah. So
right?
assigning jobs is a part and parcel of
Of
leading
course.
a team. You can't do much about it. Micromanaging, again, I avoid it. But then, if there is something time crunch, then you have to make sure that things
Yeah,
are
of
delivered. So
course,
there
of
has to
course,
be a good balance between the two.
of
But you
course.
can't be a micromanager all the time.
Yeah,
That is very counterproductive, because then people are not going to look at the bigger picture.
yeah,
In general, you're going to be invested, at least in a corporate setting, in an industry. You're going to give in your 100% if you know what is the bigger vision that you're working towards.
yeah.
In the absence of that vision, you're just focusing on one single thing, one single task, but you're not feeling that sense of ownership towards, contributing in a positive way to the grander scheme of things. And so that's very important for people to understand what is that big vision, what is that
Absolutely.
you're working for, because then it suddenly makes you feel important about the role you play in
Absolutely.
achieving that vision.
Absolutely. We have actually touched on work-life balance. Now we are talking about team building, mentorship. The reason I think these things majorly play a role, and I wanted to just put them and make it like cohesive thing, and ask your opinion. Of course, these three things are one of the major things that should drive, especially like in healthcare. You've been in the healthcare industry more than now 10 years.
Well, I like to call it more life sciences,
Oh,
less
okay, yeah.
healthcare.
So
Yes.
life sciences,
Yeah.
and you've worked with different stakeholders,
Right.
right? So as a overall perspective of how the life science industry is growing, what would be your take on, like, considering all these things, the mentorship, the work life balance, what should be the direction is the life science industry should be going forward? Because as we've addressed, the most people doesn't understand the work life balance, and people might think uh, the amount of time that you put reflects to the productivity, as you said.
Right.
So just let's put it together and just give a message,
Yeah.
or give your perspective. Where should the life sciences industry going for? Like, should be
Well,
there
the
going
life
for?
sciences industry, especially for India, is on a great growth trajectory. There is no two ways about it. You see all these companies doing so well, growing, acquiring, getting big investments. The contract research organizations in India are doing so well. And of course, they have a need for talent. They have a
Yes.
big appetite for talent. Um, so the demand for skilled scientists is always going to be there in India, but it's about how do we bridge that gap between what an academic setting churns out versus what an industry needs. A lot of this is where different players like Fabai also understand is setting up their own life sciences academy. We are doing the same. So we are all small players in the grander scheme of things. So I feel that the academic side, so the research institutes should take this upon themselves to make this more sustainable as well, to make sure that the talent that graduates is industry ready. I think that is very important. And when it comes to mentorship, I think it's very important for research institutes to invite guest lecturers from outside, from industries who can give their perspective.
Yeah.
The conversations that we are having right now are very isolated conversations.
Yeah.
There have to be more of these conversations.
Yeah.
There have to be more of interactions. There have to be more of connectors between academics and industry. I know a lot of research institutes are doing this, but I think we need to do it more aggressively and on a war footing.
Yeah, so there's a big challenge, right, to scale, especially in these conversations, to scale to a larger audience.
Yeah.
You've mentioned one thing that because like when you're transitioning, there were not a lot of mentors. One thing when you're talking about your journey, what one thing was going through my mind was the whole life sciences industry. It's a fragmented industry because it's like it has a chain of operations
Yeah.
where each individual sector has a, like, it's a sea.
Yeah.
So because of that, if I am in a specific industry, I'm also in the life science, you're also in the life science, but when we talk together with each
Yeah.
other, there might not be a coherence, or we
Yeah.
can talk together and work together,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So how to bridge this gap?
See, the fragmented nature of life sciences industry will exist. It will exist by virtue of the different flavors of the life sciences industry, right? So, for example, a chemist, a trained chemist, cannot take up a role that's for a biologist because
Yeah.
he is trained for a given skill set. Vice versa, biologists who is trained in given techniques may not be able to utilize their skills in chemistry. And even then, chemistry is a vast field, biology is a vast field. So when it comes to education, you're focusing on a sliver of it.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at an opportunity, you have to start off with an opportunity that complements,
Yes.
your skill set. So the fragmented nature of the industry by virtue of the kind of operations will always exist. But I think what is very important is for the different players of the industry to come together and at least talk about the common problem that exists,
Yeah.
because the problems are recurring.
Exactly.
And then maybe pool their resources to see how they can work in close coordination with academics to bridge those gaps.
Yeah.
So that becomes very important, but that has to be a very proactive approach that
Yeah.
has to be taken. Um, because I don't see why. See, unlike any other industry, life sciences could mean a lot of things. It could be a pharma company, a biotechnology company, a contract research organization, a nutraceutical company, an agri-tech company, med tech. All of that
Yes.
comes in life
Yes.
sciences. And the skills that are required for each of them are very different,
Very different.
and very
Absolutely.
unique.
Yeah.
So while we try to, kind of tie it all together saying this is life sciences, there is no true definition of life
Yeah.
sciences if you think about it.
Yes.
There are different sectors that are focused on. So at least within a sector, if the relevant stakeholders can join forces to make an impact, I think that would be a great starting point.
Wow. Yes. Absolutely. Let's hope what you are initiating with Rx Propellant with and many other things in Genome Valley, as you
Yeah.
said about this newsletter and your academy, where you're talking about training postgraduates. I think we hope this is the start,
Yeah.
and let's see there. You are hopeful, I am hopeful, and coming 10 years should be a lot of changes, and such kind of conversations. Let's hope
Yeah.
we'll build more.
Of course, of course. I'm very optimistic of the direction that we are taking as an industry. And
Yes.
like I said, exciting times for us. It requires a fair bit of resilience, it requires a fair bit of patience, but I think we're going to make our mark.
Nice, awesome. Let's go to a little more your expertise. You said you have done pivots. So one pivot was from academy to industry. So you have done your postdoc. After that, you went to the industry where you worked in a data setup. You are talking about AI,
Yeah.
which is now the buzzword.
Yeah,
But
but it wasn't back then. Like, there were not many life sciences companies or biotechs
exactly.
that were focused on AI back
So
then.
if you can put give a small elaboration on that aspect. Back then, there was no one used to know about a term called AI, but
Yeah.
you have worked in that times,
Yeah.
and I'm
Well, it
sure.
wasn't that old, but the word AI was not used and abused as much as it is today.
Yes,
You know, because today people use the word AI to say anything and everything
anything,
under
yeah.
the sun. But yes, we were one of the ones back in the time with Accelera to start off solutions that were based on machine learning and artificial intelligence to help scientists make better decisions on what experiments to conduct. Um, and that was, I mean, we are seeing that right now.
Yeah.
The first AI drug is in clinical trials,
Yes.
and it substantially reduces the time that's taken for R&D, reduces the cost. So it's only going to get better with time. Um, to cite some examples, I already talked about drug repurposing, which is finding new uses for an old molecule. So we've worked on a bunch of projects there. Then one project was on identification of biomarkers for cancer therapy. We worked on the clinical side, we worked on patient stratification to identify who would be the best responders for a given treatment given the genetic makeup of these patients. So there were a lot of very different statements, problem statements that we tried to solve with AI, leveraging the power of data and analytics.
Wow. As now we've said that, now you already told, AI now is used and misused in a lot of ways,
Yes.
and although it's been a buzzword and people are majorly focusing on AI since last 1 year or 2 years, since ChatGPT has revolutionized it and democratized it, still it is very early in biotech and life science industry on the application part of it. Although there are
It's
we have,
being used.
yes,
It's being used quite extensively now. In
yes,
fact, a lot of scientists are moving from traditional approaches to more prediction based approaches because it helps you make better decisions. It
yes,
helps you to fail early.
yeah,
You know, that's the buzzword. Fail
yes,
early, fail fast, because you're going to save your time and energy
yes,
in doing that. And a lot of players have come in the field now, and it's got a lot of promise, that's for sure. We are looking at a new age of how R&D is done.
exactly, that's the point, right? So the reason I'm taking this, because most of the R&D, even today, they are still resistant towards change,
Yeah.
because again, we go back to our topic about extended work hours, and their motivation decreases, and once they have fixed towards one specific domain, it's very hard to understand or adapt to new technologies.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's the opposite.
Yeah.
If you're not able to upgrade, then your
Yeah.
career is going downward.
Upskilling is the name of the game these
Yes.
days. So you have to either upskill yourself in new technologies, or you have to upskill yourself with new soft skills, you
Yes.
know, whatever it is. But it is very important to constantly learn along the way, because you would be obsolete otherwise.
Yes.
You know, you have to be open to learn, to absorb, to learning never stops. You know, even after your PhD, your learning does not stop, and it's not going to stop.
Yeah.
And that's the way to go. Sometimes you're going to learn about new techniques. Sometimes you're going to learn about other things like people management, team management, uh, things like that, conflict resolution, negotiation, which is also important. That's also a
Yes,
skill
yes.
that you need to have. It might be a soft skill, but that's helping you become a better professional. That's going to help you climb up the ladder. And yeah, you have to enjoy the ride along the way and absorb everything like a sponge.
Do you think there's an opportunity, because still untapped, a lot of such soft skills or unheard skills like addressing conflict of interest, academic research, regulations, ethical committees,
Yeah.
uh, putting in research in industry. These are all untapped areas still,
Right.
right? So,
Well,
like that.
untapped meaning they are not entirely untapped, but they are not really talked about in the light of an audience that is
Yes,
scientific.
yes,
And scientists do get that training only when they are in an industry, because
yeah,
that's a part and parcel of your
yeah.
induction. But otherwise, they are not trained for it. And I think that's also an avenue that needs to be worked on.
That's an opportunity for anyone who wants to take up entrepreneurship, and that's
Yeah,
one
yeah, yeah.
area that they can
Absolutely.
focus on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, talking about entrepreneurship, right? And you've also worked with a lot of startups who are willing to build labs, right? So, in that aspect, where do you see the industry is going?
Mm-hmm.
What's your observation?
Mm-hmm.
Point out some few major areas that there's a lot of scope to see, look forward.
Right. So, when it comes to startups, I think a lot of startups now are trying to, biotech startups are trying to create novel IP in India, which is very heartwarming because that was not the case earlier. Is generally to see that transition of Indian life sciences pharma sector from volume to value.
Yeah,
That is a very important journey
exactly.
that we are
That's
seeing,
one.
that is trickling into not only the established companies but also your startups,
Yes.
because it's not about being the biggest generic manufacturer or the biggest
Yeah.
bulk drug supplier anymore, but adding in new IP, creating novel molecules that can help treat therapies. And we see that emerge with a lot of startups now, which is very rewarding. Uh, when it comes to services, so India has always been one of the top CRO destinations, contract research organization destinations, that does research on behalf of the larger companies, and that domain is only growing now. So it's very nice to have that kind of genesis as well, to see the CRO industry growing, because what that means is that India is being looked at from a talent perspective as well,
Yes,
because
exactly.
it's the scientists who you have faith in for doing R&D on your
Yeah.
behalf, which is a great thing for us. So India is being looked at as a knowledge capital,
Yes.
and that is, I think, for me, that is a very exciting and it's a very rewarding feeling somehow, that we are not your average manufacturers anymore. We are more than that.
Yeah.
We are the brains.
Yes.
We can do high-end research on your behalf, or we can do the high-end research for ourselves, still better.
Yes.
So we are seeing that transition. That's really nice. And then there are a lot of companies that are adopting, especially startups that are adopting AI
Yes.
for their research. So they are
Exactly.
blending lab work with data analytics. So that's also the journey that we are taking now. So yeah. So it's
Nice.
very good right now. It's a great time for biologics as well, biologics and biosimilars. So we're not only focusing on small molecules anymore, we're also looking at large molecules. And yeah, all in all, I think there are many avenues where we are growing, and we should continue that way.
Exactly. I mean, I actually heard this in one of the recent podcasts that I've heard, that I want to relate it because, as you rightly mentioned, now India is being looked at as a knowledge capital, right? And if we go back 20 years back, right? I wanted to specifically mention about a parallel industry 20 years back, where pharma was and where IT was.
Yeah,
And we all know that the last 20 years, most of the economical growth is driven by IT,
yeah,
because IT was started as a knowledge outsourcing
yeah, exactly.
initially about
Yeah,
20 years back. And now we see it, like initially it was just to give some BPO services, some consulting services, and now IT is inventing in the industry in India.
Right.
Look, going forward, I think life sciences is also going to in the same direction,
Yeah.
because as you rightly mentioned, especially after COVID, India has actually looked upon the importance of research, innovation,
Yeah.
startups.
Speed to market. I think COVID was a great example of speed to market.
Exactly.
Churning out the volumes of vaccines that we did in a record period of time, I think we all should be very proud of what we've achieved
Yes,
in that.
yes, definitely.
So we are making strides and we are making our mark on the global scale, and that will only continue to grow.
Absolutely. Mine. So you're talking about laboratory perspective, right? So you are now closely working on building laboratory real estate.
Yeah.
Most people don't know what laboratory real estate means, and
Okay.
if you can shed light upon what exactly is that,
Yeah.
how is the process, how is it different from real estate.
Right.
And one thing is, myself, I have a lot of research ideas, and I have friends who are looking into doing research, and they have some innovation ideas where they can they want to build startups.
Yeah.
But as you rightly mentioned, to find a right laboratory space or to find right funding opportunities,
Yeah.
it's it's still growing, I would say.
Yeah.
But if you can democratize that knowledge
Yeah.
on
Sure.
how exactly is this field looked upon.
Yeah, sure. So what happens is, as a scientist, we never really delve into what goes into setting up a lab. We are used to having a functional lab. You go in and you do your experiments. But actually, if you dial back a couple of years before your lab is even set up, from identifying where your lab is going to be built to actually setting up the lab, getting all the approvals, because this is a very nuanced field, so there are
Yes.
very stringent approvals that you need for the infrastructure, and making sure that your building is compliant on all aspects. It's a tedious job,
Yeah.
and there is a great extent of science behind it.
Yeah.
That's the science of building labs,
Exactly. No one, most
which a
people
lot of
don't.
people don't know
Yeah.
of, because we assume that the lab just magically springs, when we want it.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, the convergence of life sciences and real estate requires a constant understanding of how the life sciences industry is also evolving, how their needs are evolving, and then building something that suits them. So, for example, when we are building our life science parks, we don't know who the end user is going to be. But we have mastered the art of standard specifications that will work for all sorts of companies when it comes to R&D. And that is very important, to know what goes where, because I don't know if my entire floor is going to be taken by one tenant, or whether it's going to be split into four and I'm going to have four
Yeah.
different tenants. And irrespective of that, my building should accommodate everything infrastructure wise, so that their operations are not hampered, even if a floor is divided. So there is a lot of science behind it, and it's very interesting to even learn about that science. Um, One thing that we do, of course, we build these lab spaces for renting out, because leasing is a great way of staying asset light.
Yeah.
For example, when you're a small company, you're a startup, right? You have funds. Are you going to put those funds into setting up your own lab, or are you going to put those funds into your R&D? You'd rather channelize them into your R&D, because
Exactly.
that's where you're going to have a better chance of getting a product or getting your next fundraise done. So these asset light models are a great way of starting for younger companies, where you don't have to worry about infrastructure. So leave the infrastructure bit to the experts. You focus on what you do best, which is science.
Yes.
And
It's
that's the
really
whole
important,
premise.
like one of the biggest challenge in any life science startup is infrastructure. Uh, this is one of the very effective ways. So I have a question here. So when you talk about infrastructure, it's very important not just having a physical space of lab, but also having the right instrument.
Yeah.
So if you can talk about that thing, are you building spaces where the the individual companies are need to get their own instrument, because there are specific instruments like NMR or mass
Yeah.
spectroscopy, which are huge instruments.
Yeah.
Not even some of the big companies can afford
Yeah. Yeah.
such kind of things.
Yeah.
So how exactly does that work out? So do you
Right.
guys put instruments as well, or you just give physical spaces?
Absolutely. So if you look at what happens traditionally in incubators in India, they have access to common analytical facilities and then startups can take up space there. Now, given our size and scale, because we are talking about a footprint of about 6.5 million square foot of lab spaces,
Wow.
that's a lot of labs.
Yes.
So while our primary target audience has always been the established companies that are in fast growth stage, we don't need to give them instruments because they prefer to get in their own instruments. But the accelerator concept that we are building, we would obviously have a common equipment facility where these startups in the smaller labs can tap into it. It's a common facility, so it's a pay-per-use charge that we have, or an hourly charge that can be passed on to them, so that they don't have to invest in the bigger ticket items, which would again be heavy on their pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think that's one that's going to be looking newer startup founders who are willing to see in life science. They'll have to look towards this specific thing,
Yeah.
because this is going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
Personally, I believe, because this is very new to me. I have still in that I've been still in that perception that how exactly a life science startup can be built with this huge challenge of infrastructure. IT startups now, they are even being grown out of garages.
Yeah.
But
You can't do
unfortunately,
that. For labs, you can't do that
yeah,
unless you're a analytics focused lab where only a bunch of computers are enough. You need lab space. And you need
yeah,
lab space where you're authorized to do these operations, right? So you
yes,
can't just take up space in an office and set up a tiny lab
exactly,
there. That's also not permitted.
yes.
So you have specialized spaces that have to be built out, and that's the gap that we are trying to address with our accelerator, where these companies can come in, they start their operations and hit the ground running.
Nice. So within your you have within your experience that you're building these labs, you've been working with startups, big companies, right? So during this process, during your interactions with the industry, what do you think is the understanding for the industry? So do you think people are well known about all this lab renting space?
No, they are not. So that's where my role comes in handy. Like I said, I'm trying to bridge that gap between life science and real estate so that the scientists get to know more about what we have to offer. Because a lot of them are not even aware of the fact that you can lease labs or how the economics of that works. And they don't understand the value that can be derived from it. So that's where I come into play to kind of, you know, paint a picture of what it is like
Yeah.
to take these labs, and like I said earlier, not just labs but get an access to an entire ecosystem. I would not be doing justice to my job if I were only to focus on a lab, because I'm a scientist myself. I
Yes.
understand what scientists need, and so I'm trying to, through those different pieces, what we are trying to do is we're also trying to fill in those gaps
Yeah.
that exist today.
So if I were like a layman, I am having an idea. I wanted to do some research, and I wanted to build like a prototype for my research idea. I have an idea, I have theory, everything, but I'll have to do some proof of concept
Right.
and build a prototype, and I need definitely lab space. So how do you sell the idea to the person, and how exactly that person needs to get to that space?
Right. So, firstly, for our accelerator, we don't look at seed stage companies. We look at
Okay.
companies that are beyond the proof of concept.
Okay.
Because I still believe for seed stage companies, the academic incubators are the best fit. Because you have your mentors right there. You have the funding from, the likes of DPT and DST that you can tap into. Because the ecosystem there is good for you to seed your idea. After you've gone beyond the seeding stage is where you need to grow your team. So we are talking about the growth phase, right?
Yeah.
Where you need to increase your team size. Quite often in life sciences, that means you also have to increase your lab footprint. That's where
Yes.
we come into
Yes.
picture. So we are not trying to compete with incubators. That's why we call ourselves an accelerator, where we are helping a lot of great ideas that have been nurtured until the proof of concept stage, unfortunately die because they don't know where to go next.
Exactly.
And we want to be that sort of platform for them when they are in the growth stage.
Yeah.
That's very important. The reason I wanted to say this is I want to have a clear distinction between a startup that has an idea versus a startup that has proven that the idea can work. And we
Yes.
work with the
Yes.
latter.
So let's just just to finish it on. You've been working with the real estate again. Let's just have a small word. Now Hyderabad is growing in a rapid state, right? You've been in the Genome Valley. The growth is tremendous, and now there's other places like the biomedical park, the pharma city.
Yeah.
So these are all the things that are coming in the future. And in India, there are not just Hyderabad. If you see, there are a lot of other tech parks,
Yeah.
biotech parks that are coming up. So if you can give a idea about how rapidly is the industry growing, and
Right.
just point out what's what to look forward.
Yeah. So Hyderabad, I would say, it's thriving right now. It's thriving because there's a lot of push even from the government to set up infrastructure for companies to grow. And like you said, there's a medical devices park, there's Genome Valley, and Genome Valley I'm very proud of. Because it's just buzzing. It's got more than 200 companies now, about 20,000 employees that work there, and all sorts of small and big companies. A lot of companies that are not in Hyderabad want to be a part of this ecosystem because finally it's the ecosystem that matters.
Yes.
Because it's a rich pool of talent, it's a rich pool of ideas. It's got great infrastructure there thanks to providers like us, and
Yes.
some companies have set up their own infrastructure as well. So Hyderabad is buzzing, and it's only going to get better. Genome Valley itself is growing, so it's now gone to phase 3, and there are plans underway to kind of rope in more companies. Um, so it's going to be it's a very exciting time, not only for Hyderabad but for India in general. So we talk to a lot of companies. We have a project in Bangalore. We talk about the ecosystem in Bangalore. Of course, Bangalore has always been the biotech capital,
Yeah.
and there as well you have a lot of startups that are growing and doing well and getting great funding. um, Mumbai is also following the same trajectory. Then you have Delhi NCR region, you have Pune, you have Vizag. Um, it's, I think this is the moment for us to seize. And I think in a lot of ways we are seizing it, which is very important. Sometimes the time is right, but maybe the circumstances aren't. And this time around, the time is right, and everything else is also in our favor.
Yeah.
So we should totally seize this opportunity and make strides. Yeah.
So, what are the specific avenues that you see? Because there are a lot of companies that are coming and registering and coming, setting up their labs.
Yeah.
So, specific avenues, if you want to
Right.
shed light on, these are the things to look forward in the coming
Yeah.
10 years in India.
Yeah. So CRO, CDMO industries are definitely growing. So CROs meaning contract research organizations, CDMO contract development and manufacturing organizations, they are on a rise. Biologics manufacturing, some biomanufacturing is also on a rise, and we'll see more of business come in to India on biomanufacturing side. MedTech, I feel, because there's a lot of make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat
Yes.
push. So MedTech is also one thriving area where we're going to see a lot of innovation happening. Um, and yeah, so biotechs in general, right? Large molecules, for innovative molecules, that's another avenue where we are going to go. So I feel that all in all, again, diverse sectors are all showing promise, which is a great sign.
Awesome. Wow, we've touched about a lot of avenues, right? Your journey itself is actually a roadmap for a lot of avenues to be touched upon. You have made the process so fun, to be honest. I'm sure the viewers also would be learning a lot of things. So, as Ketki, who is already in the industry, she's worked in different avenues. What is Ketki looking forward for her personally and the whole industry as a whole?
Yeah,
What's the vision?
that's a very big question. I think I want to. So I believe my journey brought me back to India for a reason, and I feel after a lot of trial and error, I also found my purpose. I want to be a part of that story that puts India on the global map, and I want to do my bit to make sure that we are getting there.
Yes.
So 10 years later, the 10-year story that we're all talking about, 10 years later, I want to sit back and think of, I did my bit for it. I did my bit to help my country progress. So that's uh, what is my vision for myself.
Awesome. And any suggestion for young entrepreneurs or budding professionals who are willing to get into the industry? How, any hacks or any tips to people who want to be employable?
Right. So the first thing is don't be scared, be fearless. Take rejections in a positive way because you're going to get a lot of rejections, but you're only going to learn from it. And don't be constricted because you were trained in a given topic or a given area. Think about the skills that you have honed during this journey in its entirety, and that's not just lab skills.
Yeah.
It's all the soft skills that also matter in the end, and you should present yourself as a person who not only can conduct experiments but can also conduct themselves. That is very
Yes.
important. I think that resilience, if you bring in, you would definitely crack that code of getting your foot in the door in the industry.
Awesome. So personally, if I ask for myself, how did you feel this whole podcast was, and any suggestion from your side for this podcast, or for personally for me and Jitin as speakers who are evolving?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great format for a podcast. I think it's just a conversation that flows, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it should be because if it's, and for the viewers as well, it's important for them to know that there is no script here. Nobody
Yes.
comes in
Exactly.
knowing
There's
what
no
the
script.
questions are. There are absolutely no questions that are given to you. So you kind
Yes.
of go with the flow and that keeps it interesting. I think your questioning from what the speaker is saying is also spot on. So that
Thank you.
gives a nice direction to it. I think you'll have some great conversations in the coming few podcasts as well, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope you keep actively listening to our podcast now.
Yeah.
It's a great conversation, Gitki. Again, once again, we'll take this opportunity to thank you so much. There's a lot of engaging conversation we had, lot to look forward. Now we'll actively even be vocal about anyone who wants to look lab spaces. Ketki is the one to be
Yes.
looking forward, or you can look forward for Ketki. Her vision is to grow the labs spaces in such a way that India can be more efficient in building more innovation driven economy.
That one is not just my vision; it's the vision of the entire team behind RX Propellant. So I want to correct you there.
I mean, yeah,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
right now you are here,
Yeah.
so
Representing them.
yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
So look forward for RX Propellant, especially Ketki. She is. I mean, we didn't expect this conversation to be so thought provoking. I mean, personally, I just tell you my feedback. We didn't expect anything here.
Yeah.
Anything so close to that much deep conversation that we had.
Yeah.
It was really thought provoking. I hope this reaches to majority of the people who are willing to start their own labs
Yeah.
or getting into innovation sector. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
it
so
was
much.
great. It was great being a part of this podcast. And all the best to you guys. I think you're doing a fantastic job. The
Thank you.
setup is brilliant. So yeah, I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to see how this pans out in something bigger very soon.
Wow.